Town of Windermere workshop. And to work. You will please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And it's a workshop of the Town Council of Windermere. It's an opportunity for Town Council to have free flowing conversation and discussion on items. Again, we won't make any decisions tonight. There will be no votes. We will work generally towards consensus so we can bring that to the regular schedule. Presentation.
Yes, sir. First, I'd like to just provide you some updated information that we received on Friday last week. This is a call from the brewery attorney, and they were notified that morning as well that Healthy West pulling the grant. We're waiting on the letter. So as far as grant funds from Healthy West Orange, any elements of conditions that were in that grant, you don't have to worry about. So tonight will be a free-form discussion of what you'd like to see, whether you have a grant, or you don't have a grant, where you want to focus. And then once we get that information, then we can come back with an actual cost and figure out how we self-fund this, or if there's any other grant opportunities out there that we can try to get. But the presentation that we have tonight is similar to the ones that we presented at the previous public information workshop. We had one Zoom public information workshop, and we also had an in-person workshop last week. At both of those meetings, there was a lot of healthy discussion relative to the historical designation of the town hall and how we're trying to maintain that with any improvements that we do. We've had meetings with SHPO in between, and those updates were provided to the public at that last public information workshop. Tonight we'll present what was originally proposed, what was amended, and then the discussions that we had with SHPO. Some of the comments that we had from some of the residents were that they want to make sure that we coordinated with the Secretary of Interior, which we definitely will. What we've experienced from the Secretary of Interior, since it's federal, and federal dollars are not included in this project just yet, is that they will not review it until such time that they are involved. But they refer to the state. The state is just doing a technical review, not any authoritative review, because there's no state dollars associated with this just yet either. So we've been working with SHPO, and then what we'll do tonight is have Tony present, then we'll have either John present, then Brad Committee present on the progression that we've seen tonight. But you know, we have received a lot of public comment. Some have been very detailed as far as the cabinetry in the kitchen, and then some have been, you know, generalized to wanting to see, instead of the multi-purpose room back here, would be to utilize them as restrooms for the basketball courts in the town square. And then Tony and John talked about the bump out, how when we talked to the Secretary of Interior, they said that's frowned upon, so that's something that the town staff would not recommend moving forward with. And with that said, I'll turn it over to Tony, and then John, and Brad.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. As the town manager mentioned, we have been working with the state office at SHPO. We had conversations with them in August and September last year initially. As part of those conversations, they wanted to reiterate to us that anything that we were doing at that point in time would be relative to technical advice, not any kind of authority on their part. So I just want to make sure that we're clear with that. In September and August, when we were talking with them, that was before the idea of the Healthy West Orange grant. So we had a different type of floor plan, which John will go through with you all. And then we'll proceed forward to let you know how, with the potential of the Healthy West Orange grant, we added a few elements to the town hall facility that would have met that grant. And then finally, Mr. Cornelius will go through what our last conversations were with SHPO relative to the bump out of these existing restrooms here in Town Hall, as well as things like the metal roof. So we'll go over that shortly, but I will turn it over to John now so we can kind of go through the evolution of Town Hall, as I call it.
It's an evolution. So, one of the things we started out, a couple years ago, working with the Historic Preservation Board, which come up with, what are the two major components that we wanted to do. One was, maintaining a historical designation, while at the same time looking at a concept design that provided a good program, while at the same time allowing us to have this building stand here for another 100 years. And I know you guys have seen this slide probably 15 times in the next couple months, and so I'm not going to go through the components of it, but one of the things that we looked at were three major components. One was safety, accessibility, and functionality of the building. How do we provide foundation enhancements? How do we look at ADA accessibility? How do we look at new exits that meet the latest code for the state, and looking at guardrails and all those things that are important for us, that if we operate and function a building, how do we make sure that we're maintaining our code? Secondly, we look at historical aesthetic improvements. Where do we have rotting wood? Where do we have the things that we need to do to this building to ensure that it's going to last for another 100 years? And then the last thing was looking at additional enhancements. As we worked closely with HPD, we wanted to make sure that, hey, where do you guys see this building as a visionary? That one does align with the SHPO requirements, but at the same time allows us to use this building appropriately because it's not 1898 anymore. It's now the 21st century. So how do we work those in with Wi-Fi and even meetings tonight? And so those are the three major components that we looked at in a healthy design. This is the existing floor plan of the town hall, and that's just really for reference for you guys to understand the current program. And then this was our first proposal that we did after meeting with HPD and understanding the program and understanding the future and how we would look at, we may bring this building into the 21st century. And the good news is, you know, we stretch, right? When you're in design, you stretch conceptually, you look at the things that you guys need, the things that we need, the things that the town needs. And so that's what you do through the design process. And this is what we came up with. And I know if you go to the next slide, it'll kind of show you the history of this. You guys have all seen this before. We had, you know, the recommendation from the Historic Preservation Board to look at a multi-purpose room that could be ultimately used maybe as a bridal suite, gave it multi-functionality. We looked at expansion of the restrooms, not just for this, but for other meetings and things that we have. And next slide. And then we looked at ADA accessibility to the stage by providing a handicap ramp in the corner, which I think is a good thing to do. The state also, SHPO also agreed with us that that is a really good thing that they can support. And then we also looked at how do we control audio and visual rooms so that if we do have events and parties and things that are in here, that people aren't messing with the equipment of the town. And so that's kind of the basis of the original design that we came up with, which was ADA functionality, just controlling the interior of the town and providing this building to last another 100 years. These are just blow-ups of some of the stuff that we looked at with the ADA accessibility plans, the improvements. One of the things that we came to our design was saying, hey, it would make more sense for us to have the ADA ramp on the south side of the building, not the north side of the building, because it's adjacent to the existing ADA parking. And it doesn't impede folks that have ADA accessibility. So it was a wise decision through the architect and through some of our conversation. Obviously, if we have, you know, the expanded restrooms, which I'll get into later, we have some more ADA rooms. So you can go to the next slide. These are kind of the elevations depicting the element plan that we came up with and showing what we've done.
relative to the restoration of town hall. And so then we had a meeting in July, and part of the conversation was, hey, how do we potentially look at funding from the Healthy West Orange grant, and looking at their program, and looking at the commitment that the town made through Rotary and the town and Rotary made through Healthy West Orange, and how do we come up with a viable plan that meets the program elements in a very kind way, but also sensitive to the Historic Preservation Board, sensitive to the building, but yet also sensitive to the grant. So we were working these elements and how we develop something that led and met the program of the Healthy West Orange, while at the same time meeting the program for what the Historic Preservation Board and the town staff had discussed. And this was the element plan that we came up with, which was a slight extension of the deck on the north side, the addition of a gazebo, and then came back and after the meeting with SHPO, and Brad will get into that in more detail. We proposed everything that we were looking at because we wanted to ensure that we would not lose a historical designation of this town. And so we went back to SHPO, and they, as an advisory role, were very pleased ultimately with what we were proposing, and then gave us very authentic and positive feedback. And one of the pushbacks that they had was a bump out on the building because it potentially changes the look of the building from the front elevation. And so at that point in time, we said, okay, we get that. They said the gazebo, you need to study the massing with that. We said, okay, we get that. We do have an historical architect. We'll look at those kinds of things and then come back with you for a re-proposal based on your advisory comments. And we determined that the bump out on the bathrooms probably wasn't the right thing to do, that we would internally look at how we deal with that from an ADA accessibility and promoting that. So we're moving a bump out, also removing a lot of ADA accessibility issues. So that was a good thing. And we pushed the bathrooms into the new multi-purpose room, which gives us an opportunity to have restrooms in our downtown facility, ADA accessibility, and doesn't affect the exterior elevation from Main Street of the town hall. In addition to that, the only other comment that they had was relative to the deck on the north side might be a little too large, and so we looked at opportunities to push that back, but they said, hey, once we understand what that design means and in context, it may be okay, we just don't know. It just appears from what you guys are telling us in a schematical design perspective on what that means. And so those are the kind of things that we've looked at with them. We settled on a plan ultimately, and do we have that?
We do, yep, John.
Yeah.
What'll happen now is Brad will go through all the comments, and then the final slide will be the updated plan.
I think I should have offered Brad, that's the history.
It's something to say. So again, I'm Brad Prince, I'm serving as your contact and town planner. So I'm gonna go over the highlights of our conversation with SHPO. So on January 24th, the four of us, plus Doug Deerlick, who's landscape architect, which is me, who we met, we did a teams meeting with Alana Gold with the state of Florida, and she is the serving as the SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Officer. And so we had that meeting, and it was a really good, positive meeting. What I think is very important for everybody to hear, we did let Ms. Gold direct the meeting. She's the one who directed the conversations and the topics. But the very first thing she said to us was she was very impressed with the town, the residents and the staff and everyone about how engaged everybody is and how much they are caring. So she definitely recognized how much the town is putting into this, which was very, very helpful. And she also reconfirmed, as I've said, that she is providing this as a technical assistance and advice only, and not a regulatory kind of comment. So again, she was very clear about that. She probably said it 10 times when we met with her. That's why you see it here several times as well. It was very clear that this is information to help us to make sure we do meet the standards, but she did not have any regulatory authority over us. in terms of what the town does. And one of the things that was very important, we did confirm with her, though, was the town's full intent to meet all the requirements and what SHPO wants to see happen to ensure that we are compliant. So it was that we went there wanting to be compliant, not to not be compliant. So we confirmed that with her. Okay, and these are the comments. She led off with the ADA question, and that was her first concern. And she said she was fully comfortable with everything the town's proposing to do and saw no concerns or issues with any of the ADA improvements to ramp or the interior stage elevator. So everything was good with that. As John has said already, she did have the concern with the bathroom bump out. And what she did was, before we said anything, she said, but I have some alternatives for you, which was one was to use the multi-purpose room for that. Or another suggestion she had was enlarge the existing bathrooms that are already here. And as John said, we responded to her, that was something that we'd already talked about here at the town, was moving the bathrooms into that multi-purpose room. And that made her happy. So in terms of the gazebo, again, as John said, her main concern was just the massing of it, the size of it, particularly related to the height. She felt it was compliant with the historic preservation standards if basically the roof would be lowered or flattened. As well as John said about bringing the porch back and reducing the size of the porch. She felt with those two adjustments that it absolutely could be compliant, and she didn't see a concern with it.
And it's important to note that you can see both roof lines are in this that we presented to them, and she selected the lower one.
Correct. You can see that the darker line shows the reduced roof line on that image there on the screen. So that was a good conversation with them. And that's more showing the same is the change in the roof line. You can see with the red lines how it comes down, and then the idea with reducing the porch on that image as well, to help reduce the massing of the gazebo and the related porch. In terms of the metal roofing material, she was very clear that it's the preference under these standards is that you do replace kind with kind with what's there, and you say, but she also said very clearly, you're in Florida, and that a metal roof is appropriate because of the protective nature of it, particularly related to water intrusion and things like that. Her concern though was if you use the metal roof, just make sure you use a metal roof that is compliant with the character of the building, using things like a metal shingle, thin shingle, or crimp roof, something like that. And the image that we have in the PowerPoint does show that the historic schoolhouse here, you have a crimp metal roof on there, so it could be consistent with that, which I think she believed that would be consistent with that type of material. In terms of the use of the hardy board, again, she gave us very good feedback. She said that it would not be appropriate for the main portion of the building, the main base of the building, but it would be appropriate to be used for the non-historic additions to the building. And she again said that what should be used is what the materials were. I think John said, so the idea now is that for the main part of the building, using that hard pine. She also though said, it's not completely out of the question, but you have to be very careful in terms of that. If you use it, it has to be installed the same way, in the same orientation, have the same joinery. So basically it looks the same as what was there before. But she definitely said it's best to go to the original materials. Next, please. So at the end, what we wanted to just reaffirm with her that was, our intent of meeting with her was to be sure that what the town's doing is compliant with historic requirements for the renovations. We were very appreciative of her and the information she gave us. So she did give us very good information, very good direction. I also made sure that she understood that we are following the town's local historic preservation requirements and standards by going through, once it's ready to go, it's back to your historic preservation board for the certificate of appropriateness. So we are following the local process. So she was assured of that process. Also, Mr. Beer agreed, the comments that she provided were very in line with things that we've had discussions on the past. And again, for one more time, she again said, these are advisory and for information, not regulatory. And she's very willing to help us as we move forward. So it was a very positive, good conversation, and I think we got good direction on how to make sure this is done right.
And one of the other items that I wanted to mention is in their initial request for additional information for us, they asked us about our plans for the flat roof, where we were going to take that to a slight slope. Well, we responded back to her, and our architect got back to her with the details of what that sloping was. That didn't even come up in this final conversation, so we were able to satisfy her thoughts on that.
Right, and that is a good point to say. The comments that she brought up, and that's why we let her lead the conversation, were the comments she had remaining. If she didn't bring it up at that meeting, she wasn't concerned about it any longer. So that's why we let her lead that discussion to make sure we address her remaining concerns.
So now John will go over where we ended up with that conversation. We're able to modify, thanks to John, the floor plan a little bit based on that conversation, so you can see what that looked like.
So if you remember the last one I sent you, the bump out's now gone, looking at a simplified ADA accessibility plan to the southwest side of the building up onto the deck. Looking at new restrooms with deck access off of the deck, and then obviously the potential for a shortened deck. We still do need to study that because we have air conditioning units and the like that are in that area. So there might be a slight modification, but I think ultimately what we're trying to do is come up with a very high level concept for you all to understand and to know that ultimately this will be refined through architectural design, walking alongside the school, as well as our historic architect. So if there's any questions on the plan, we will certainly love to take it from you, but this is the ultimate plan.
Thank you all, I appreciate that. I know it's a lot of refinement and a lot of compromise work to get us to where we are today. Certainly the news from Healthy West Orange is heartening and makes this process much more difficult. Like in no way stops us from our responsibility to protect and preserve and renovate the building as it sits here today. It just makes it more difficult, makes it take a lot longer. And it makes it a bit more of a process. That is disappointing to me. It's disappointing to me the way that it's all kind of played out. But that's the hand we have here today. So continue to push forward and move forward with that. Council, any questions for staff on the presentation portion?
I just have one. For the slope of the roof on the addition on the set where bathrooms currently exist, is that 1 on 12? The slope?
Yeah, I believe it is, John.
It's actually probably a little bit less than that, but we haven't determined what the ultimate slope would be until we get into the design. Right now, it's just very schematic. What we didn't want to do, we're trying not to interrupt the two windows in the middle. And so that's just have to be studied. Right now, it's just very conceptual.
There's something about a code that had changed, maybe that was Brad, that the minimums were one on over 12 for something with new building code.
That, I'm not aware of
The slope of the roof is really going to be determined on the material that we do, and the material will drive what their minimum slope requirements are for them to have warranty on the roof system.
And there's a resident, I know there's a residential code change that you can't have flat roofs or that, have a 2%, so.
Right. Correct.
And we definitely want to get away from that flat roof for a maintenance perspective.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for staff?
I guess my question is now that we've lost the grant, is this something we can still afford moving on with the canopy scene parks?
I don't know. I mean, can we afford it eventually? You know, what we need from council is some sort of consensus. Do we move forward with this plan that's up here tonight? and go ahead and work with, Tom Price, who's the historical architect, Wade Trim with their consultants, and then staff to try to bring this to some sort of point where we can actually get a design, get some quotes, figure out how much it's going to cost, and then figure out how we're gonna fund this. I know that the scope changed with the Healthy West Orange funds moving from the pavilion to the town hall. So do you still want to proceed with, again, these elements in this scope? Or since there is no elements or requirements for a grant, do you want to go back to removing the performance gazebo? I don't think staff would recommend removing the new restrooms that are going to be located in the southwest of the town facilities. But we just need to know which direction you want to go in. You want to include what you see here, or do you want us to amend that and then take it to the next step? And then finally get some quotes and get some estimates so we can figure out how we're going to fund this.
So I think, thank you, Robert, for that. I mean, so a couple things on the affordability scale. This definitely changes the equation a significant amount. So obviously, we don't have $2 million budgeted or whatever it's gonna take. I assume it'd be at least $2 million to do this particular project. We don't have those dollars budgeted. We do have some discretionary funding available each year, but we also have some questions that still have to be worked out about the Healthy West Orange grant. We have immediate needs of restrooms that no longer exist downtown facilities, and currently businesses are picking up the slack on folks using the restrooms at certain events that don't have those facilities with them. And then we have kind of whether council would like to move forward with, hey, do you want to take the plan as it sits today, the public input that we've received, scaled and properly done, and then potentially a la carte it, I would assume, or phase it out in some way, and like a contract. It certainly seems feasible, from my limited knowledge of buildings. So that's about the new year, but we could certainly look at that aspect, or council may decide or want to get down to make it a little bit more bite-sized. But my experience on projects like these are, you get rid of an element or two, save a couple $100,000 here or there, but you won't save a significant amount of money, because a lot of the work that needs to be done here is trying to structure fundamental the things that you might not see, that just help to protect and preserve the building and make it ready for another 100 years. That's our goal. Certainly, there we can chime in and give those sense of that's fine.
I'm in favor of the plan. I love the porch. The bathrooms are definitely necessary. The gazebo, take or leave it, but I really like the porch more. I think it's going to be functional. It'll be a crucial part for a lot of different of our current events. I can see who use it. I can't imagine that Pet Fest wouldn't. We rent stages all the time, but a raised deck. And they may say that they don't want it, but it's a good spot and it points north away from the residents. Because every time it's at a stage, it's either facing west or Hoopla sets theirs up in the basketball court facing backwards. But 9 times out of 10, it's in this corner facing northwest, not due north or even northeast.
You certainly have more control over sound. It's the
Right.
United States.
Yeah,
I would agree with the city did wherever it comes into play.
absolutely.
My only concern is that area right there is where all the HVAC units and electrical equipment are. That's a very expensive move. I'd be supportive of the northern portion as long as it doesn't impede those couple of AC.
So Tony, I think, and I think in this particular draft and drawing here, we did this so you could have access to the kitchen through those windows, but with that no longer being a functional requirement, right? You could just leave a gap like we do now, where the grant goes by those units. That way, you're right, reposition all those canopies can get expensive. So, and you lose efficiency the farther we get, condensing and everything, so it may make sense to just leave that gap there, right? So,
Yeah, and I think it's really just a reduction in size, not necessarily a reduction in anything, so in theory. For that, where the units are, you could actually slim that walkway up and then have another section of the deck that's where we have it, that could come up to walk up and for pancake breakfast for July or whatever, so there's multiple opportunities for that redesign.
yeah, I think there's way forward there as well, just have to look creative on that. But I agree, not moving mechanicals is a good place to save money if you're gaining from it, other than maybe some aesthetics, right?
We need to find out if we have to close it off. That'll be. the next one.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, and hope,
Yes.
Because living in the HVAC system inside, I'm pretty sure we're gonna have to do get replacement of that as well.
yeah, and I also know that there are, so I mean, these are the kind of things, so the, I kind of wrote down the things that. I think the porch, obviously the porch is a priority for all of us, bathrooms, we certainly miss those bathrooms, and then that's quickly becoming an issue. We've been talking about the kitchen for 10 years, and I in town. We know that ADA is an issue that needs to be addressed as we make changes. And then we also know that there are structural repairs that while not very sexy, need to be done. Okay, 'cause I don't think doorways should go like this. And then, we've got some aesthetic and functional renovations of the exterior of the building that will work to better preserve it as well. So those are just kind of the 6 categories that I grew up that we kind of need to make sure we focus on. And those may be some, maybe that's all apartment, which I don't know,
I have to agree with that a la carte approach, and if this was my house and I had to prioritize, I would do the most expedient route with funding for the bathrooms first. That seems to be the biggest issue with most people, not just business owners, but people visiting town. So the building is not, I would consider unsafe, but immediately evacuate this building, so I would rate it with the bathroom first and foremost. Now, of course, John has to chime in on this, but I would think we could do that independent of anything else, if we had funding for it sooner than later, just because we need those anyway. And then I work my way down and maybe even simultaneously with the porch. I don't want the gazebo. I think the feedback I get from most people is they want the bathroom, they want the renovations, they don't want the porch. The gazebo is the last thing most people want. However, I do believe that if we bump that deck out and work around that, all the HVAC stuff, and we create some sort of, I don't want to call it performance stage, some sort of performance stage on that whole side as far as you can before we get that door. That might solve some of our problems, and if we can push everything more this direction as opposed to pushing everything out that corner, which would still create the same problem, the residents going backwards. If we push it further to the front of the building, at least then whatever is there, down road or whatever, the sound will be projected more towards commercial area than back there. But usually if you leave like that and have that fork that short, it's just gonna push the band out further towards where the gazebo is now. And the problem's gonna be the same for the residents in the back here. So I think if you extend that porch down further towards the front, push it away from the HVAC, it'll at least give them more of a natural sound barrier for the residents back there. So I think that the mayor is correct. I think we need to, funding is an issue, I obviously see that. We always planned on building new restrooms anyway, so we need to prioritize restrooms, work our way across the porch, maybe have that performance stage extended further towards the front, and then work on further funding and repairs and improvements to the town hall in the future.
So I don't disagree with any of that necessarily, I'm just wondering, are the structural elements required even before that? I wish I could answer that, maybe we don't have that information.
Well, my impression is that the reason that this porch was allowed to be in the first place is it was not. We know that it is. but that was not attached to the building.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tommy, I meant.
Oh.
I know that, even if the porch falls
Yeah,
off, it's good, but yeah.
And I can't
change the building, I just don't know.
I live in a 100-year-old house, and we used to have a floor, so for me to get to notice.
Yeah. I didn't notice when we fill up.
Yeah.
That is one of the reasons why Bob continually walks to the left. That's right. But from a prioritization perspective, this is really what council has to think about, right?
Right.
What are we missing?
But you don't need all that for tonight, right? What we need for tonight.
Now, what we need for tonight is to make sure, do you guys like the overall plan? And if you don't, what are those things? We're looking for clear direction
Yes.
from you guys.
Clear direction.
To be able to bring finally something back to you guys, so you guys can say, I like, well, this is good. We can then prioritize that. There are structural issues with the porch, there's rotting wood, there's a whole host of things, but once we finally understand floor plan and concept, then we can ultimately come back with you and figure out how do we execute against the plan. So right now, we have a plan.
I'll go on record as saying it's a good problem.
I hope that this would be the only meeting, I know we'd be this, knock this can down to a long time. But I hope based on new information about the funding, that this would not be the final meeting on approving these plans.
This is just a concept though.
Yeah.
There's no plan here. This is the drawing that okay as
So I
well.
need to be looking at that, I hope we have.
I'm not saying that we don't.
Down that road though. At some point, we have to move forward and make decisions.
Right.
I like the plan. Gazebo, not gazebo, that doesn't matter. The plan with the bathrooms, the interior, how we have the building now, with the multi-function room being inside next to the original bathrooms and possibility of the family restroom kind of wedged in there. I like all that, because we're not losing all our storage either, which is also a premium in this building. Lift and all, that's great. So I'm all for it.
I'd say I like also if we mix the gazebo and push that performance stage further towards the front, other than that, I have no problem.
And I don't think.
I'll go. Okay. Alright, can you hear me? So I think the most important things, I think we need to do it all la carte. I think that's the only way we're gonna be able to afford it. I think that the most important things need to be what is called an home restoration or a building restoration, protecting the envelope of the building, which is the roof, the foundation, because we've all talked about the issues with the foundation. And if you're changing roofs and we're putting other things in there, you need to have a strong foundation for the weight of anything that we're doing in it. And around the perimeter of the property, there is the wood rot on the building as well. It's not just on the porch. I've walked the whole property and looked at it. And even where the addition is, there's a sag where the addition meets the second story structure of the main town hall. And my guess is that a lot of that is due to issues with the foundation. It's a pure support structure, so I think that needs to be looked at and beefed up, because if you don't have the main basics to keep everything strong for the actual building, the envelope to keep it watertight, then we're gonna have more deterioration than we already do. And the porch goes right along with that, because obviously, it doesn't have the same kind of walls, but we have the porch supports that need it and we improve. And the tie-ins to the second story has to be, correct. I don't even know what kind of flashing or things exist there. The other thing that a lot of people that I heard everybody bring up, whether they liked the gazebo or not, was fire suppression. And that was mentioned at the last public input. We need fire suppression in this building, whether that's a water source or a non-water source, because, there may be an issue with the proper pressure that we need for fire suppression from a water source. Typically in kitchens, it's not water anyway, because you don't want to use water on a grease fire. So I think fire suppression needs to be a part of it, and those are the things that just protect the building itself. And then obviously, I do think we need the ADA, we know we need some sort of bathrooms. and the kitchen renovation, because I've been in there when they're working for Elder Luncheon and Crazy Cart Party and a bunch of other different organizations that use it. But, and we need them, and I'm not saying they're secondary, but I don't know which is gonna come first, like, I don't know how bad the roof is. But I think we need to see prices, for those things first, to get a line item idea of what those prices are, before we decide if we can, bite off a the gazebo, I'm okay with not doing that. I don't care for the gazebo, never did. The air conditioner units, I've actually looked through the attic of the ceiling here, as well as in the attic, which you can actually walk in and ductwork system. So if we need a new air conditioning unit, that's a whole nother price right there.
They're new.
They're new, okay, great, well, the ductwork is wonky at best, I'm looking at the ductwork. But it would be very expensive to remove that, and that's not the only thing out there, we also have an electric panel. And it's my understanding, because I've checked into it a little bit, that the electric panel, which is right where that red line would come up between the second windows in the back and the other three in the front. There's an electric panel there it sources all the stuff outside. And any of that is very costly, so I'm not super keen on the porch being right there either because of that. And the issue with moving it to the front, and rather, John, correct me if I'm wrong, the more we move the porch to the front, the more it impacts the historic designation, because it's changing the view from the road. So that would be the only issue with moving it to the front. As far as the bathrooms go, and again, this goes back to fire suppression, when the community room was there, and I have a 6-year-old, so I've stood in that line to use those restrooms many times, and I can tell you at one of the restrooms, there's cigarette butts in the toilets. I've smelled smoke in those community bathrooms during food trucks pre-COVID. So I know people may smoke in our bathrooms, and we need fire suppression. I also, and I've had conversations with different people about this, like, if we're not using the Healthy West Orange money, I know we need the bathrooms. And I know a lot of people might like them here, but that's what everybody wants, that's what everybody wants. But I do also know that when you're standing in line at food trucks or holiday people or anything else, there is a queue of a line that stands sometimes 10, 12 deep, just trying to get to that. And I think about the functionality of how we use the back porch for holiday hoopla and Halloween, and the tables are set up and they're passing out the food. And I wonder if that's going to impede some of that happening. Technically, we could put the bathrooms anywhere we want in town square, maybe even over by the library. I know a lot of people go there to use the bathrooms now, but they did before as well. So I'm good with bathrooms, not good with the gazebo, not good with the northern porch. But I think we need to protect the building first, and once we can figure out how much all these different line items cost, it might make us, change our minds on what we do. So I also don't want to kick the can, but maybe partially.
Right, but you have to have a separate plan for staff to move forward to be able to bring those numbers and bring that all encompassing plan back to council. So I don't think that it's difficult to all ballpark. But I mean, I think we can pass that council provide a plan that has the elements broken up in sensible segments and phases that would work, that we prioritize based upon the need and protection of the building. Your other comments are certainly sound. Your foundation comments, those are 1,000% correct. There are things that need to be done. And sometimes you can balance the functional with, one functional aesthetic, one functional aesthetic until you get there.
Yes.
But I don't want to swag it. I want to do it based on engineering assessments and numbers and because my suspicions of whether is under there is hopefully worse than what it actually looks like, but I might be right. Yeah, I just want to get the I appreciate the comments. Councilor Devin.
Just real quick, John, how much more do you need to get a current working? With pad alternates for the gazebo, alternates for the restroom?
Man, you're talking a lot like you and I spent our entire lives at Universal. We come out with this very slim plan and then do a bunch of add-ons. I think at the end of the day, in this environment, what we have to do is come up with a plan and a program that you as council agree on. If it's gazebo, great. If it's no gazebo, great. If it's a northern deck that's shortened, takes into consideration with the units, we can come a little bit farther to the east if the deck is a little bit smaller. So those things are appropriate based on our conversations. Obviously, and, we've given you guys facts, putting a family restroom in there is gonna be a little pricey, because there's a fan plug that sits in there that services the back area. So, there are costs, but at the end of the day, I think what we're looking for, having gone through this process for the last 3.5 years, is what is it that you, as council and representing the community, want staff to do? And so the more we can garner from you guys on scope. I've heard a lot of great stuff tonight. I've heard, making sure foundations are solid, making sure rotted wood isn't there, making sure that we have restrooms. I kind of like the gazebo, but I don't like the gazebo. I kind of like the north porch, but I don't like the north porch. At the end of the day, for us to be able to give you guys good, solid feedback and information on pricing, we need solid resonance from you guys.
So John, what I'm seeing is, I like the plan, but there's a lot of things I like that I can't afford.
I get it.
So,
And we could certainly add the gazebo, and we can certainly send us down that path. But at the end of the day, if 4 out of 5 council members don't want a gazebo, I think we have to be careful on how we waste, our time, staff time, and architectural time in doing that. And I think this is where we really are asking. We've come to the precipice tonight. We no longer have a permit. We come up with multiple designs, and at some point in time, we just need clear direction from you guys on what is it that you want us to do.
So it's.
And sorry, I'm being bold, but it's frustrating, especially the path that I've been down.
It's true, it's part of the reason you don't have a grant, it's to let the tail wag the dog, you take control of that, you should.
Correct.
And that is part of that, and, that resonates with me, and resonates with me, whoever resonates with it, we let some things, drive pace that killed some of those options. I'm not, like I said, I'm not happy at all. I think it's damn near a crime, but here we are.
But Mayor, I think it's important.
To get it to a complete and total direction, because we can't, you just can't gaslight on you. You could do some different pricing options potentially, but at the end of the day, this is where we want to go. We need to be there to say it.
Yeah, but in the same vein, we as staff and we as engineers and consultants want to honor what you guys want us to do. And so, Tony, and I didn't mean that in a bold sense, but if that's something that you think that it would be important for the council to understand, hey, if we did do a gazebo, what would that cost be? Those are certainly the things we can do.
But is it too uncertain to say we might take a gazebo, we may take a porch with a gazebo and a porch without a gazebo? Is that too difficult? Is that not clear enough? That's what I'm wondering.
What do you want? What the blessing is, after losing the healthy wrestling grant, we can do anything we want.
Yeah, that's
Right? I mean, I'm just trying to look at the positive side of where we are right now. Certainly, to Tom's point, if the council says, hey, I get it. Tom's acknowledging that it might be a good opportunity to have an outdoor band venue, but it might not be appropriate to be a gazebo. So
I think too,
that's a holistically different approach in costing.
if the gazebo is what causes people to have pause, my personal feelings are that controlled sound, you're going to have some sound. Controlled sounds better than uncontrolled sound, but I know that there are a lot of people who disagree with me on that, and that's fine. If we're sitting here and the gazebo is what's giving people heartburn, then like we said, we can say that and make a motion tomorrow that go one way or another.
I think residents, not including the members sitting out here on council, the discussions we've had, I have not heard one resident have a problem with us having bathrooms, a new kitchen, and fixing the building and having fire suppression. I've not heard any negativity on any of those components. And I think that with the cost of inflation and just, you know, what we've talked about, other projects where numbers are coming in so much higher for FEMA money for some of our other projects, benefit cost ratios, I think you're looking at well over a $2 million project here. Well over, without the gazebo. I think it's gonna cost a lot to do the stuff that this town hall really needs. We don't even know what can of worms, as they say in the renovation industry, we're going to get into when they start looking at the foundation and the roof and whatever. But what I know is that every resident that I've talked to does not have a problem with this plan, even the bathrooms. I don't even hear any contention on the bathrooms. It's always the gazebo and the porch. So if you're talking about a $1.5 to $2 million project, I don't see where it makes sense when this is gonna be such a, as somebody said at one of the other meetings, biting off the bite of the elephant, chew one piece at a time to do this. It doesn't make sense financially right now to include the gazebo and the porch if we have all those other things we can do. And I haven't heard any feedback against anything other than the gazebo and that porch.
I would say the same thing, on my own personal opinion, I think the reason where we're at now, looking at this issue, the way we are looking at it, and we would probably already move forward, and like I say, I heard, you know, everybody jumped on board, maybe the Village Westville grant, because of all the things that would have happened, except the people, that was the only thing, they were willing to accept it because they wanted to get the rest of it. And I was almost at that point too, to be honest with you, I was like, I talked to my wife today, and I'm like, well, you know, I'm gonna do this community once, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna just suck it up and just, you know, do what's best for everybody. But that was the only point that anybody had a problem with, and maybe you're right, maybe the envelope is the first most important part of it, I don't know, that's up to these guys over here, the builders and stuff, but I've had the same reaction from people unsolicited. They only thought they had anything with it, it's just the deal, and not doing this as much like a Porsche, and in fact, he did not want to do it.
Okay, so for direction, everybody likes this plan minus the gazebo, right?
Gazebo and porch. The only reason
Well,
I.
let's try some more, let's see, that can be cut off anyways, that's not structural.
My concern with the porch is because I think it's gonna be costly with the other stuff, I mean, we have.
You know, you're talking nickels and dimes when you're talking about the whole project here, so let's not cut ourselves off and go, let's not do any of this or even plan for it because we're so afraid of it. We can always take it off. That's the beauty of it. The gazebo design with the roof line, that's a whole different story. But if we design that porch and the back porch, all the way out the roof, the way it should be, we can have it taken off the plans if we go, it's unattainable. But to sit here and go, okay, let's not worry about the envelope and everything else. These guys need basic design. So the engineers can go, okay, let's get out the structure and the readers, let's have it inspected, let's start getting the numbers. But they're asking for us to go, yes, this overall, we're good with it. We're beating a dead horse.
You just build it like that building on 9-4.
So your question is, does everybody agree with that minus the gazebo? My answer to your question is yes.
That's it.
Yes.
I know. That good?
I heard two yeses.
More yeses or more no's.
Well, I mean,
Let's do a quick run now. Start again. Start.
I can live with it without the gazebo, if that's not too costly on the porch.
Yes or no?
Hey, Jim, can I think the one thing that I think that I don't want to confuse is cost, because tonight what we're looking at is overall concept plan.
You're going to.
Because it can be phased in a manner that is on a phase based on cost. What we're asking you guys is, what is the scope?
You wanna start with me?
This is scope minus the.
Correct.
Everyone's nodding.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yes. All right, we can have a gazebo later. Well, I mean, and you totally could.
Yeah, we know it that way, because I was saying, I would not negative things about this.
I think we have our work cut out for us. And I thank everybody, especially with the back and forth and the yin and the yang and certainly kind of pressing all the input, it's good. Trying hard to make something that would at least halfway pay for itself, but we're able to get there. But it's the direction for staff and the structure. We'll put that in a motion for you. Need that at our next council meeting tomorrow.
We'll have to put it on the March town council meetings, just to note.
Else we do for you guys.
I just had one question, so with the removal of the grant, do you have any insight to payment of that term?
We're waiting on the letter from Healthy West Orange to the Rotary Inc. to see what those terms are gonna be. Once I get that letter, then I can bring it back to town council.
Do we know the reason that they pulled the grant? I'm just asking.
Once we get that letter, it'll clarify,
Okay.
but I can only assume based on the longevity of actually having a project that has some reason for it.
Anything else for good of the order?
Yes, sir.
Seeing that, we will join our adjourn. Six.